Our program on the law of attraction by David Diamond is at 1 o'clock in the afternoon on Zoom. And if you're interested in taking part in a 2-hour workshop, go to our website, startingpoint.org, and all the information, the Zoom numbers and stuff for that are there, okay? And that's open if anybody wants to go to it. And that's at 1 o'clock on Saturday. I'm going to begin tonight by doing the reading from one of my meditation books, The Language of Letting Go, which is a daily meditation book for codependency. June 17th, surrender. Master the lessons of your present circumstances. Do not move forward by resisting what is undesirable. In our life today, we move forward, we grow, we change by acceptance. Avoidance is not the key. Surrender opens the door. Listen to this truth. We are each in our own present circumstances for a reason. There is a lesson, a valuable lesson that must be learned before we can move forward. Something important is being worked out in us and those around us. We may not be able to identify it today, but we can know that it is important. We can know that it is good. Overcome not by force, overcome by surrender. The battle is fought and won inside of ourselves. We must go through it until we learn, until we accept, until we become grateful, until we are set free. Today I will be open to the lessons of my present circumstances. I don't have to label, know, or understand what I'm learning. I will see clearly in God's time. For today, trust and gratitude are sufficient. I wanted to share that because I want to talk a lot tonight about the traits and characteristics of codependency. And I have to warn you before I start. I might get you over depressed tonight. Hope you don't mind. But I promise for the next 8 sessions, I'll get you out of the depression into recovery, okay? So I really got to be able to identify a lot of the codependency traits and characteristics so you'll get a better understanding of what they're really all about. I want to go back in history just for a couple of minutes. I want to go back to the year 1930. I'm sure none of you were around then. Maybe Howie was, but nobody else was. But in 1930, if you had a drug problem, an alcohol problem, mental health problem, they dealt with you in a simple way. It was called out of sight, out of mind. They didn't know what to do, so they just forgot about you. They stuck you into the institution. In 1935, we had the founding of AA. We talked about one thing only, alcohol. The word codependency in 1935 simply meant anyone related to, connected to, or part of alcoholism. In the 60s and 70s, we had a revolution in our society. It's almost like everything that was in the closet came out of the closet. And so somewhere around the middle 70s, a lady wrote a book called Adult Children of Alcoholics. When that book came out, it literally blew my mind. In the book were the traits and characteristics of an adult child of an alcoholic. And I can relate to so many of them because I come from a family that has some history of alcoholism and also from my immediate family. And so I learned over the course of the journey that these traits actually connected to me. And so as a result of that, people began to read the book and they said, how come these things pertain to me and my parents were an alcoholic? So in 1983, believe it or not, there was a 12-step program called ACDP, Adult Children of Dysfunctional Parents, which meant everybody qualified. It's fantastic. So the bottom line was, in 85, 2 books came out, Codependent No More and Facing Codependency. So when those books came out, it revolutionized the whole way in which we looked at addiction, we looked at life, we looked at this issue of codependency. The definition of codependency today is any person, place, or thing that I have built a dependency on, means I cannot function without it. That makes my life unmanageable, that makes my life crazy, that makes my life nuts. The key is dependency and unmanageability. That can be a substance, that can be a person, that can be a child, that can be a family member, that can be a job. The bottom line is I built so much of a dependency on it that I can't literally live a life of my own. And so in reality, the basic part of it is we have to look at that, look at the concept of it. Now I'm going to show you what I mean. If I could take you back into the first 10 years of your life and do a inventory of your childhood, I could tell you everything about you. By the time we were 10 years old, all of our traits, all of our characteristics, all of our foundations have been developed. And the amazing part about it is, it only takes 80 years to work on it after that, so it's not a problem. The bottom line is, we go back to roots and foundations. It works like this. The moment of your birth, when you came into this world, whether you realize it or not, you actually join 5 families. So when I talk about family, I'm not just talking about blood family. I'm talking about what I call the 5 families we enter at birth. Your family of origin or your blood family, your neighborhood, your cultural or your environment family, your religious family system or your non-religious family system. I'm sure when I was 1 month old, I didn't jump up and down in my crib and say, please baptize me Catholic. My parents took me, placed me into their belief system, which really wasn't mine. But then it kind of became my normal. A peer family, and peers are tough on peers, and finally a society family. Just to give an example, someone born, let's say, in 1998, the first 10 years of their life was from 98 to 2008. First 10 years of my life were from 1940 to 1950. Now, did we get different messages? Sure we did. So as a result, we literally are bombarded by thousands of messages that create our personality. We develop these traits. So I want to emphasize the fact that they don't just come from blood family. They come from all different elements. And as a result, growing up in these elements, we develop traits and characteristics. Now watch. The moment of our birth, when we come into this world, we have 5 basic fundamental spiritual needs. When I use the word spiritual, by the way, I'm not necessarily talking about religion. The word actually means to come to an awakening of my personal self, develop my personal spirit. So as a result, then, the thing I'm trying to get across is, at birth, we expect these family systems to give me my 5 basic needs for life so I can do some growing. And those spiritual needs are very simple. Safety. I cannot do any growing or learning unless I feel safe. Unconditional love. To be accepted and loved unconditionally. I have a need for basics. Food, shelter, and clothing. I have a need deep down inside for my family system to teach me basic life skills, how to interact with other human beings, how to socialize, how to play, how to be able to experience a sense of trust and intimacy with my families. All these things are supposed to be taught to me as a child. But above all, they are supposed to teach me my history. Where am I all about? Where do I come from? What are my roots? What are my foundations? What are my backgrounds? Now, if those things don't get met when you're a child, then you're going to search for them for the rest of your life. So if instead of getting these needs met, you're normal as a child, and I'll just share some of mine, and growing up as a child in those first 10 years, first of all, since I'm Italian, automatically, I got 3 things: fear, guilt, and worry. In fact, they gave me a PhD in it. The bottom line is they became a normal to me. At the same time, I picked up shame and embarrassment. My mom was very good at doing that because of overprotecting me and fixing me and saving me from everything. And as a result, I also picked up a lot of anger, a lot of frustration. Really, in reality, I kind of lost a piece of my childhood. So as a result of that, and many of us can look at our own inventory and see how this fits. But the bottom line is, as a result of these things that happen to us as children growing up and these messages that we get, we develop certain things called survivor skills. We call them the traits and characteristics. Now I'm going to put them in 3 categories to kind of make them as clear as I can. We either become isolators, avoidance, hiding, fantasy. I go into a make-believe world or a fantasy world to avoid reality because I can't handle it or deal with it, or caretaking. Now that one I can talk about for a couple of weeks. But the bottom line is, I spend my life taking care of somebody else, never have to look at me. These are traits, these are characteristics. How are they interconnected with addiction? Because codependency is the core root of all addiction, no matter what the addiction is. And as a result, then, so many times in life, because we can't handle it or deal with it, we actually have a tendency to migrate towards certain things to be able to get ourselves through life. For example, isolators. There are normally young children growing up in homes that were empty, that were cold, that were sad. I call these the children of fear. These are kids who never got a lot of hugs, a lot of intimacy, or a lot of closeness as children. And so as a result, they basically grew up kind of empty, kind of lonely. So usually what happens to them, they migrate towards certain types of addictions. For example, two addictions we don't talk a lot about: institutional addiction and technology addiction. And believe it or not, it's only a matter of time, there will be a 12-step program called Technology Anonymous, because basically we're moving deeper and deeper into that process. These are all great ways to hide, to avoid. Institutions, remember, I'm always searching for family. So if I really get sick, what do? I hire a therapist that's called Rent-A-Parent. And I expect the therapist to be everything for me. If I get sick, they put me into an institution. I get 3 meals a day. I get the warm fuzzies. I get companionship. I don't want to leave. So after a while, I actually go from institution to institution. Even our jails are institutions. It's a place where I feel safe, even though it's not safe. It's hard to really understand, but having done prison chaplain work, I do understand it. Because after a while, it becomes your normal. As a result, then, I basically go towards institutions for a place to hide. At the same time, I want them to be a sense of family. It's a place to belong. Technology is the exact same thing. It's a way for me to avoid having to have intimacy or closeness with people. Everything turns into a machine. So people actually talk to each other through a machine. And they get into texting and stuff to that effect. And after a while, we lose contact on a physical level with people around us. We don't get to really have a one-on-one, be able to really be close to them. Intimacy is scary sometimes, especially for isolators. The other addiction that goes under isolation is drugs and alcohol. Very many times, people migrate towards drugs and alcohol. I call these the functional addicts. These are the ones who are up for work every day. These are the ones you'll never know they have an addiction problem because they function. To the outside world, they'd be okay, but they have to actually medicate themselves constantly to be able to function and get through life. So they find a way to do that. They do it privately and they do it in secret. But to say other addiction that goes along with this are relationship addictions. Real simple. I'm empty, I'm lonely, I'm scared, I'm afraid. The first person that comes along that treats me nice, I'm taking the sucker home. If they try to get away, they're in trouble. There's an old saying we have in recovery. If you truly love someone, let them go. They're supposed to come back, they'll come back. Well, the bottom line is very simple. Addicts don't believe that. See, addicts basically change that to, if you truly love someone, follow them and stalk them. If they try to get away, kill them. We have a little bit of possessiveness and control in relationships. And many times they're very abusive relationships because we literally try to control everybody around us. And as a result, then, I don't have to look at my own stuff because I can literally use you as a way to basically get me through life. So basically, it becomes a very powerful process. The scary thing about it is, so many times people migrate towards this, and they do it because basically they're empty and lonely. And usually underneath of it all, there's a lot of emptiness, loneliness, a lot of abandonment, and also a lot of abuse. Also under this particular isolation comes workaholism. So many of us have a tendency to get our identity from what we do. And so as a result, then, it's almost like I'm scared to death of change. So as a result, I literally have to keep doing the same thing every day till 10 years after I'm dead. It becomes my normal after a while. And as a result, then I can hide there, and I can produce there. It becomes like another family for me to belong to. And it's scary. We saw this happen a lot of times when change came into our society, when the first computers came out. You know, people got very upset. You're going to replace me with a machine. I did things a certain way for a long period of time. Now you're bringing in all this newfangled stuff for me to do. A lot of people went through a lot of trauma, a lot of change process over that. And literally, it's almost like their identity was taken away from them. So depression and anxiety plays a big role in that area. And many of us kind of function our life around things such as this. It gives me an identity, gives me a place to belong, part of it. The other addiction under isolation is anorexia. Anorexia is pretty scary because basically 80% of all anorexics are female, and they have major, major, major daddy issues, father issues. And many of them, very many times, have secrets. And as a result, then, very many times they have a tendency to migrate into anorexia, because what it does is they literally shut their body down, they can't function, and they go back to becoming a child again, and somebody's got to take care of them. That becomes their normal after a while. Now, the second area is called fantasy, the fantasy person. The fantasy codependent are individuals who grew up in homes where there's a lot of secrets. They grew up in homes very many times where there are secrets such as sexual abuse, trauma. These are the kids that want to take anybody home because they're embarrassed. These are the kids who at a very early age start making up stories. It's almost like they make stories up, but they really aren't making things up. We have a term for this in psychology. It's called disassociation. They create another situation to avoid what they have to look at. So as a result, at a very early age, they start talking about things that aren't real. I remember one time a teacher told me this. She had a third grader, and asked the third grader one day about her parents, because her parents never come to the PTA meetings. The third grader actually, with a straight face, told the teacher, "My father is a Secret Service agent. He's not allowed to go out in public." The father was a drunk. But see, basically, deep down inside, there's always a secret. There's something hiding in the background. So as a result, there's a lot of embarrassment. And the biggest thing connected to fantasy is shame. And as a result, we have a tendency to literally hide our secrets and keep them on the inside. Also, under this particular concept comes certain addictions. For example, drugs and alcohol. These are the unmanageable drug addicts and alcoholics. If you ever confront them to deal with their problem, the first thing they'll say to you is, "Not me, must be somebody else." One of the funniest situations in my life, and I love telling the story, one of the funniest situations in my life when I was running the halfway house in South Philadelphia back in the beginning, when I was still a priest. And I remember coming out of the halfway house one day on 23rd Street, I walked past a bar. Now, the bar door was open, it was summertime. One of the guys in my halfway house was sitting at the bar having a shot and a beer. I walked past, I looked at him, he looked at me, I didn't say a word. Next thing you know, he comes running out of the bar, screaming down the street, "Father, I'm not drinking." He carried the damn shot glass out with him. When he saw me, he put it in his pocket. Now tell me how many normal drinkers do that. The bottom line is, as soon as he saw me, shame kicked in. And immediately, a disassociation, he came out there and yelled he wasn't drinking, but in reality, he really believed that. And this is hard for us to understand, but it is a big part of the process we go through in life. And so very many times when shame hits us very deeply, have a tendency to disassociate. And as a result, then we going to another person, another place. But we also see this very many times in other addictions called the fantasy addictions. For example, things such as sexual addiction, things such as gambling, they're all fantasy addictions. Basically, things such as compulsive shoplifting, things basically that are connected to power, image, Basically, people that are very empty on the inside and have all kinds of inside secrets have a tendency to, on the outside, try to perform. Narcissism is part of this, the whole concept of power, control. And as a result, then I can't handle any criticism at all. So as a result, I have to blame. I got to put things. Basically, I'm scared to death to be exposed. I'm scared to death you'll find out who I really am. And as a result, I literally disassociate and create another whole person. A lot of times we really think they're lying or stuff to that effect, but in reality, they really believe what they're saying. It's the scary part about it. They're scary addictions. A great area, this is sexual addiction. And the concept that very many times, it's also referred to many times as the clandestine addiction. It's a way in which we can basically, run away from reality and go into a make-believe world. I'll give you an example of this. I'll tell a story. I had a lady come to see me one time at Starting Point, and she brought her husband with her. I love when they bring the husbands. There's a ball and chain around his leg as he comes in. She stands there. Now, you got to visualize this. I'm sitting there doing the intake, and she stands up and she says, she's probably about 34, 35 years old, says, "Take a look at me, Vince. Do you see anything wrong with me?" Well, I kind of stood there. I kind of got, well, wait a minute now. What's going on here? She said, "Take a look at my body. Isn't it beautiful?" I didn't know. What am I supposed to say? She says, "Look, see that man," pointing to her husband. "He won't come near me. He won't touch me. Has nothing to do with me. He's downstairs in the computer at night on the chat rooms, having sex on the computer, all kinds of crazy behavior. I don't get it." I had to explain something to her. When you were dating, you were his fantasy. Then you got married. The honeymoon was a fantasy. Then he had to come into what we call reality. And then the invaders came along. They're called children. Everything kept changing. And as a result, then the fantasy was broken. And as a result, then he had to constantly migrate back to some sort of fantasy. He couldn't deal with the reality in front of him. And it's scary. Not only in this particular addiction, but in gambling, all the fantasy addictions are addictions of avoidance. And really, they're addictions of shame, and they're connected to this aspect that we have a difficult time dealing with a lot of our reality. So many times we have a tendency to go to the fantasy world to avoid real world or real reality. It's scary. And deep down inside, it's because of fear. I said so many times, codependency is centralized around control, avoidance, and fear. And shame is a big piece of that. I really believe very deeply that shame can literally immobilize people, hold people down. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to deal with it. But remember the old saying we have in the program, we're as sick as our secrets. And secrets can literally do a number on you. These addictions are scary because they live in a fantasy world, a make-believe world. Very difficult to deal with until somebody gets in trouble, until something breaks the barrier. Real quick example. There's a lady that we work with at Starting Point. Very interesting lady. They lived in California, her and her husband. Her husband was an attorney. He made a lot of money. She was very well off. She was a pillar of the community, but she had a secret life. 3 days a week, she was an expensive call girl. She did this for years. Her husband had no idea at all what was going on. It was her little secret. It's a rush, it's a high, it's insanity. She ended up one day soliciting a police officer. The fantasy was broken. There was scandal, all kinds of headlines, and literally that pillar of the community came crashing down. They literally had to move from California to the East Coast to begin treatment and begin to make changes. Thank God they did. But it's scary because usually with the fantasy addictions, it takes something very powerful to break the cycle. And shame is a big part of it. The other addictions that come under fantasy are relationship addictions. I love to be involved in relationships with people who are not available for relationships. If I can't have you, I want you. If you become available, get lost. See, it's the fantasy aspect again. I can actually have a relationship with you in a make-believe world, but to me, I make it into a real world. It's a control thing, because literally, I'm in charge of it. At least I think I am. Good classic case of this is a situation we experienced at Starting Point, where this gentleman locally was a pretty well-off guy. He was a CEO of a big company, and really was an executive person. He had an administrative secretary who was really a good secretary. The only problem was she was in love with him in her head. He had no knowledge of it at all. So here's how fantasizers think. From 9 to 5 every day, he belongs to me. What he does after 5 o'clock, I don't want to know. She has her period of time that he belongs to her. She's living in a fantasy. The only problem is the fantasy gets broken. His wife has the audacity one day to come and surprise him for lunch. Now, you got to remember, she's the other woman now. When she arrives and they go out to lunch, she goes off the deep end. She literally tore his office apart. The anger came out. The frustration came out. She cut his sofa with a knife. They had to call the police. They had her arrested. They put her into treatment. They had to take her to the crisis center, deal with all kinds of stuff. And it's scary. See, we don't understand sometimes how the mind operates. And things like this can happen so easily. The other addiction, very many times, that comes under that is bulimia. Bulimia is another secret addiction. Because to the outside, I look okay, but I have things going on the inside. So eating disorders fit all three of these categories. The last area is caretaking. Caretakers are normally the goody two-shoes kids, the nice guys and gals. These are the kids that go from 3 to 33, the responsible child. These are the kids where a lot of expectations are put on them, the goody two-shoes, the kids that do real well, they do good in school, they function very well, but everybody has all these expectations on them, and they want them to be a certain way, to function a certain way. All kinds of pressure is put on them. What's happening deep down inside, they really are angry. So caretakers basically are very angry people. But as a result then, to the outside, they have to appear to be all together. So what do? They literally, to the outside, they have a tendency to basically function, do things really well, but they have a lot of control issues. Remember the word fine. Don't ever say, that's what I say, don't say fine, please. The word fine, defined, means, I can't say the first word. I am frustrated, insecure, neurotic, and emotional. Congratulations, you're fine. Again, it's an avoidance thing. We do this all the time. It's a big part of the process we go through. So as a result, then, what happens is caretakers very many times function very well in the workplace. Example, if you want to make a lot of money, I'll give you the formula to make a lot of money. Okay, all you have to do is start your own business, okay? If you need 15 workers, hire 3 caretakers. Most caretakers do the work of 5 people. And they're good, don't get me wrong, but they have rules. The rules are you must give them total control of the whole entire company. Remember that now. All you do is stop on Friday and pick up the money. Let them run it because they now own it as far as they're concerned. But don't pay them too much. God forbid, please. They'll work extra hours, they'll work overtime, and basically they drive themselves like crazy. They have no idea at all what they're worth at all. It's a big part of the process they go through. So as a result, then, very many times, they have a tendency to overperform. At the same time, they're angry. They're going to bitch about you, gripe about you, complain about you all day long. But don't worry about it. They'll never do anything. Because basically, it's just a way of life for them. They got to get it out somewhere. So it becomes a normal to them after a period of time. And so it's one of the things we have to look at and realize the fact that so many times we literally migrate towards these behaviors because I'm trying to function. I need an identity. At the same time, I have this anger inside of me, but I process it by making it look like I'm getting everything done. Another big area of caretakers, we never know what our worth is. It's a big issue for me. I know that. You know, one of the things I realized, I'll give you a story real quick. I got a phone call one day from the VA hospital in Coatesville. At the VA hospital, they said to me, "I want you to come and do a training workshop for our staff." I said, "Sure, I love doing them." They always ask me that question, "What's your fee?" Of course, I hemmed and hawed and went around. Finally, I gave my stock answer. "Well, whatever your normal fee is, it's fine. Whatever you normally pay." Did the workshop. When I was done, I went up and basically the guy gave me an envelope. I'm a good codependent. I can't let anybody see me taking the envelope. So I stuck it in my pocket, left, got in the car, made sure nobody was looking, opened it up. It was a check for $750. You know, I felt guilty. I felt like they made a mistake. And like an idiot, I went back into the place and said to the guy, "You sure this is right?" He said, "What are you, crazy? Get out of here. You said pay you the normal fee. That's a normal fee." On the way home, I felt guilty. I actually wanted to basically give part of it away. Maybe I should do this. God forbid you just enjoy it because it's yours. I have these issues today. I'm better at it. I'm getting better at it with a lot of help. But really, in reality, they're issues that will haunt us for the rest of our life. Part of our codependency behavior patterns. We have to keep working at them. It's a big part of it. The other thing that's really important when you look at this concept is to realize the fact that caretaking is so scary. The other addictions under caretaking is drugs and alcohol. These are the behind-the-scenes addicts. Very quiet. Nobody will know anything. The secret addicts, I call them. All their drinking, all their drugging takes place behind closed doors. And literally, no one will ever know their secrets. They function very well on the outside, but they have no real sense of who they are on the inside. And so as a result, then, they literally live in this two worlds. As a result, then, it becomes normal to them. It's just a lot of times, even when it comes to other addictions, for example, pedophiles, very many times they function in two worlds. And usually they function very well in one world. And the other world's their secret world. And that's where basically shame, guilt, all kinds of things come into play, and we're caretakers too. The other addiction that comes under caretaking is relationship addiction. These are individuals who love to get involved in relationships with sickies. The sicker, the better. They have a mantra. Bring me your sick and you're deprived and I will take care of them. But there's rules. Caretakers always have rules. Don't you dare get better. So I'm going to bitch about you, gripe about you, and complain about you all day long. See, I don't want you to get better because I really can use you as my victim. We call that the parent-child relationship. Literally, I'm in charge, you little child, me take care of you. I'll tell you an example of this. My aunt, a long time ago, I used to go visit her. When I visited her, her next door neighbor, I was still a priest at the time, my next door neighbor would come over. Her next door neighbor was Italian, and basically would come in, I think she saw me coming, and we sit around the table, and the neighbor would tell the story. I love the story. She would say the same thing every time. She talked about her husband, the bum. Been living with this bum for 42 years. He's a bum. He does nothing. I cook, I clean, I take care of him, I feed him, I do all this and all that. All she did was gripe and gripe and gripe. And one day I made a big mistake. I said to her, "Why do you stay with him?" She almost ripped the top of my head off. She screamed at me, "Because I love him." Oh, God. She scared me half to death. I'm going to tell you a secret. That man never tried to do anything, she killed him. She literally lived her life around him. And that literally was the way in which she functioned. And she liked him being sick. It's all part of it. Another good example of this, I used to go to the Al-Anon meeting in South Philly back when they had the halfway house there on Friday nights. And we had this lady who would come to the meeting all the time. And all she did was bitch about her husband, the alcoholic. I mean, she ran him into the ground every week. And then the sucker, guess what he did? He went to a treatment center and he got sober. God. She would then come to the meetings and bitch because he goes to too many damn AA meetings now. She needs something to constantly find so she can stay in that control pattern again. It's scary. The other addiction that comes under this is we call the caretaker individual that migrates towards compulsive overeating. And compulsive overeating is a very scary disease. It's so powerful because compulsive overeaters don't realize how much anger they have inside of them. And they literally close themselves off with food because there's such a negative image of their body, who they are, of what they're all about. And so food is a way to hide. It's comfort. It keeps me from having to look at things and deal with things. I have to deal with my sexuality, all types of things I can avoid. Nobody will get too close to me because I'm afraid. I'm afraid of intimacy. At the same time, I'm really angry. I'm frustrated. And many of this stuff goes back into that concept that they were given responsibility at a very early age. Now they're angry about it. They either take it out on themselves, or they take it out on others. The frustration. But caretakers, one thing about us, we always have a smile on our face. Everything's always wonderful and great. We always get things done. We always function very well. I share these traits and these characteristics about codependency because these are things we migrate towards for survival purposes. When really, in reality, these are things that affect each and every one of us in the course of our journey in life. One of the things we have to learn is this is part of who we are. One of the secrets we'll talk a lot about when we get into the recovery process is we need to be able to embrace our history, to learn from it, not to look at it negatively, and to realize the fact that our history is our teacher. And as a result, then we begin to understand how we can learn so much from our foundations, from our basics. So it's not about looking at your past and looking at it negatively. You have to learn how to be able to learn something positive from it, because it is the concept of who we are as people. We'll get more into that. What I want to do in the next 4 weeks, I want to go deeper into codependency. Next, I'll talk about family systems next week, how they affect us, and how to do an inventory of your own family systems, how to look at them on the inside. I'll also talk next week about what is normal. But there really is a normal, but normals keep changing over the course of our journey in life. So it's all about change, which is important. In the third session, we'll talk about how to play and how to have fun. In that third session, we'll take on the concept that codependents take life very seriously. We think too much. We analyze all the time, make ourselves half crazy. And as a result, we have to learn how to play, how to celebrate, how to have fun, how to be able to be a kid again. We must avoid the concept of being a kid. And that's an important part of it. We have to look in that direction. Concept, very many times, of being able to deal with that concept is really important. So we'll take you through that process. We'll show you how it works. We'll go through the traits and characteristics of primarily because literally what it's doing is it literally takes the part of the inside. And so what I want to be able to do basically is share this with you and show you how this process works. So I hope this helps you understand the traits and characteristics of codependency and the process of which they are, and begin to realize the importance of being able to look within your own self, to identify them, and then be able to work on them. And so I hope I can get you too depressed. But the bottom line is, remember, we're just learning about our traits. We have to learn how to move them in a different direction and be able to develop a positive concept of them. What I want to do now, because we have a tradition at Starting Point, on our memorial wall at Starting Point, we usually pray after all the lectures. And we pray primarily, basically, to be able to remember those people that have gone before us. So please join me in a prayer. God, we come before you tonight as a family. We ask your blessing. We ask your guidance and strengthen us in all that we do. We pray especially for those who have gone before us. We thank them for the messages they've given us, for the hope they've given us. We thank them for the journey they walked in this earth. We ask God to bless them and teach them to guide us on our journey today. We ask that when they look within our own selves and realize the beauty we have inside of us, to realize our strength, to realize that we all are a family gathered together, that we help one another, we grow with each other, we celebrate with each other. Teach us to be open to your message. Teach us to realize that you are constantly teaching us and helping us on our journey in life. With gratitude and with love, we come before you. We ask your blessing, we ask your guidance, and we ask your direction. And we ask that deep down inside, each and every one of us, may we be able to be one of your servants, be able to give the gift of love you've given us, and may share it with others. So we pray this and we ask this in God's name. Amen. Amen. Now I'm going to ask all of you if you would just join me in saying the Serenity Prayer.
God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. God's will, not mine, be done.